like Regretevator. A little too much. And I know you guys like it too, because a few weeks ago I asked you guys what characters you want to see me make crafts out of. I got a few requests, but Gnarpy was the most common recommendation. This inspired me to make a series of cat-themed Regretevator keychain plushies, so that's what I'll be doing in this video. I hope you enjoy the process. For this project, I'm going to make a base pattern and, depending on the character, make alterations like to the ear shape or number of paws. And details will be done with embroidery and applique. 2 of my designs will follow this base, but to not overwhelm the average person who knows nothing about sewing, the first plush I make is going to be a much simpler design. So first I'll make Taro, then Dr. Retro, and we're going to end it on Gnarpy. Each plush increases in detail and complexity as the video progresses. But before working on the actual plushies, I need to make a pattern. Most pieces for this project can be drawn out, but for the body piece, I wanted to have some dimension. Some 3-dimension, super epic blender segue. And I'm using a squash sphere to make my body piece. I have a plugin on Blender called Seams to Sewing Patterns, and it allows me to convert the UV unwrap of my geometry into an SVG file. I'm still practicing this workflow for plushie making, but so far it's been going pretty well. I actually use my Dr. Retro Doughboy as a reference for this project. A great way to learn plushie making is to look at how existing plushies are made, so thank you Dr. Retro, you're the best Roblox plushie to exist. Satisfied with my loaf, I export my body piece as an SVG, and open Affinity to clean up my edges, add seam allowance, and vectorize my other pattern pieces. And then I make designs for the embroidery. Soon I have everything all drawn out, vectorized, and ready to print. Starting with Taro. Taro's pattern is really simple. 1 pattern piece for the body, and 1 for the shades. First, I do Taro's facial embroidery. I take a piece of tearaway stabilizer and trace my pattern piece using a gel pen. I place my tracing on a piece of minky, and then I put that in a small embroidery hoop. To keep the design from shifting, I do a basting stitch along my seam lines and seam allowance. I flip the hoop and trace the pattern piece on the back of my fabric. I actually use my basting stitch to help with alignment. I then embroider Taro's mouth shape with satin stitches. Taro was actually one of my favorite critters on the critter capture floor. Why? I don't know. I just thought it was cute. But now Taro has like lore or something, and a kitty, and I think that's awesome. After finishing the embroidery, I can then take it out of the hoop, remove the stabilizer, and since my piece of fabric was big enough, I fold it in half, clamp those together along the edges, and sew along my drawn outline. I pivot 1 stitch at the tips of Taro's ears, since this helps make those ends look pointier. Afterwards, I clip my seam allowance, turn out the plush, add stuffing, and close the opening with a ladder stitch. But now I start working on the glasses. For this, I use black cotton for its smooth texture. On the right side of the fabric, I draw markers for embroidering the eye shines. Using those markers, I use a tight zigzag stitch on my sewing machine to save time on embroidery, but this can still be done by hand. On the back of my fabric, I trace out the pattern template and fold my fabric over to sew along my drawn guideline. These pieces are too small to pin or clip under the sewing machine, so by folding a square of fabric over itself, I can then add clips to the corners of the fabric, and it makes it easier to sew and guide under the needle, and the sewing machine is less likely to eat my fabric. I keep a space open so I could turn the glasses right side out, add some stuffing, and close the hole with a ladder stitch. Since I forgot to add the ribbon loop when sewing the body pieces, I attach it to the back, but I'll show how to do this properly later on. I'm such a pro at this. Taro's looking a little bald without their shades, so I line the two pieces, pin the shades in place, and luckily they don't have any eyes or this would be super painful, and then stitch those two plush pieces together. But for the first plush, it looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. It's super tiny and cute, and will make a great addition on my keychain. And now we can get a little more detailed with the next keychain. Dr. Retro's pattern has a few more pieces to deal with. 2 body pieces, 4 ear pieces with 2 inner ear pieces, and 4 paw pieces. Like Taro, I trace my embroidery design onto my stabilizer and get that in my embroidery hoop. You might notice this design looks different to the in-game model for Dr. Retro, and that's because I'm using the newer model meant for future shorts. I think it looks really cute, and I love Dr. Retro, but if this thing was animated in a serious manner, I think it would be hard to take seriously. Plus, she looks more like the Animal Jam emojis now. So silly, yay, wahoo, so cutesy. I use a backstitch for outlining the design, and then a satin stitch for filling in my shapes. But for filling in larger areas, I do a long and short stitch, or an attempt at a long and short stitch. My stitches aren't the neatest or the straightest. Oh, but it's fine, it's fine! I like to stick to 2 to 3 strands for most of my embroidering, and I use embroidery thread meant for machine embroidery. There's nothing wrong with using skeins of embroidery floss, but most brands that are available at craft stores aren't shiny. Plus, it saves me the hassle of buying both embroidery spools and then skeins of floss. And if you don't do embroidery, I don't think you realize how tedious this can get. Even filling in spaces that don't seem that large can take hours. And this face did in fact take hours. Hey, you should subscribe so I can continue to torture myself with crafts like this. Thank you! But hey, the amount of time I took to make her face was worth it because she is so cute and gorgeous. So I free her from the hoop and get ready to work on her toe beans! Working on smaller areas of embroidery is so rewarding after spending hours on a larger area. The last piece of embroidery is on the back of the body. And honestly, at this point my wrist was in agony after hand embroidering for hours. So I may have done some free motion embroidery for the tail. And I'll explain how I do this more when I do Gnarpy's embroidery because I soon realized how over the deep end I was thinking I could hand embroider all of those details. But after finishing the back, that's all of Dr. Retro's embroidery done. And before sewing the entire plush together, I'm gonna sew some of the smaller pieces. First, I have to attach the inner ear pieces to the front ear pieces. This is done by doing what's called applique, where I stitch a small piece of fabric directly on top of a larger piece, mostly for detailing. I do a running stitch along the edge to attach it in place. And to hide the raw edge of my inner ear piece, I go back over with a zigzag stitch. Since these pieces were so tiny, to prevent my machine from eating my fabric, I put a piece of paper underneath my earpiece. After the applique is complete, I sew the front earpiece to a back earpiece. But I don't sew the ear fully shut, since I still need to turn it out after sewing. I repeat that for both ears, and the results are pretty nice. I put the earpieces aside while I finish preparing the other pattern pieces. For the paws, I cut out 2 top pieces, and sew them each to an embroidered paw piece. And like the ears, I keep the bottoms open for turning them back right side out. I also had some fun with the paws before sewing the full plush. This is what happens when you sew late into the night. To prepare the body pieces, I sew along all of the darts on the front and back pieces. And now it's time to bring all of the pattern pieces together. I fold over my ears and paws, and sew them to my face piece using markers I placed on my template. And I do the same thing for the paw pieces. When doing this, alignment is really important. I just remember the paw pads have to be facing upwards. She's coming together. Ow. The last thing I need to prepare and forgot for Taro is prepare the keychain loop. I cut out a piece of ribbon and fold it in half. And I sew along that cut edge of the ribbon, and that makes an easy and cute keychain loop. And now it's time to bring all of the pattern pieces together. I place that ribbon loop upside down on top of my face piece, and then I place my back piece on top of the face piece. I clip that in place and sew around her body. Keeping a spot open to turn her back out. But soon she was free and flat. Let's fix that by giving her some stuffing. And also some whimsy. Once I'm happy, I ladder stitch her shut and admire her first day on Earth. She is so cute. I love her so much. And the keychain loop being properly sewn in between the seams leaves a very clean and professional finish. The squeaker is also a great addition. She kind of becomes a little stress ball. But now comes the more complex plush of this video. Gnarpy's complexity doesn't come from being difficult to sew. It's that Z has so much embroidery. And not only that, but double the paws, which have embroidery on both sides. And while it is possible to do all this embroidery by hand, it's tedious. A lot more tedious than you think. I still do some areas by hand, like the whiskers, mouth, and facial markings on the front. But for other embroidered areas, I do something called free motion embroidery. Basically, I'm taking my sewing machine and turning it into an embroidery machine. Sort of. Embroidery machines read a digital file, and using precise movement can get really intricate and nice looking embroidery. Instead of that, I will be manually guiding my hoop under the needle. Now I have become the embroidery machine. I remove my regular presser foot in exchange for a free motion foot. I also put my fabric and trace design upside down in my hoop, which allows me to grab the sides of my hoop to guide under my needle. I think free motion embroidery is a great compromise if you want to have a machine stitched look but don't want to invest hundreds or thousands in an embroidery machine. Like me. A $10 presser foot is a great compromise if you already own a sewing machine. The only downside is you have to learn how to control your hoop to get the exact shape you want. And this takes a lot of practice. This is only my second time ever doing free motion embroidery. My first time was almost a year ago, so I am still really rusty and I don't have a lot of practice. As always, when using a sewing machine, safety is important. If you do decide to try out free motion embroidery for yourself, please keep your precious fingers far from the needle when stitching. If I need to hold my fabric piece closer to the needle, I make sure I don't get super close to the C shape on my presser foot. For some areas, I fill my shape in, and then I go over with a small zigzag stitch to clean up my edges. Stitching the eyes kind of felt like drawing. No matter what you do, your second eye will never look like your first. Drawing is a little more forgiving because you could erase or undo, but here you kind of only have one shot unless you want to completely restart or rip your thread and risk tearing your fabric. The eyes I end up stitching don't look identical, but they still look pretty okay. And I think I did a pretty good job. I do the back piece entirely with free motion embroidery, and at this point my sewing machine was kind of screaming for help. It was begging me for oil. You know, it didn't sound like this earlier. You could go back in the video and like compare or something. And eventually, the back embroidery is finished. Afterwards, I embroider the paws, all 8 pieces that needed detailing, but I got it done. And sew them all together. Yay. Similar to how I did Dr. Retro's ears, I add an applique piece on the fronts of Gnarpy's earpieces. I also embroider a small triangle on the side since Gnarpy has 2 pairs of ears, but for the sake of simplifying this pattern, I merged that into one pattern piece. But afterwards, I hand stitch a green outline around this applique since you can faintly see it on Gnarpy's model. and sew to a back piece afterwards. And now to play the long game of putting all of the pieces together. And this process is the exact same as Dr. Retro. And after prep is complete, I get my Gnarpy burger all set up. Sewing the final round is so satisfying. After hours of prep, all of the pieces coming together at once, it makes me feel like all of my hard work was worth it. And I follow similar steps to the last plush. Turn, stuff, squeaker, stuff, and sew shut. And here is the finished Gnarpy ball. I am so proud of all the embroidered details, but most of all, I am so proud of these eyes. They look so good. And here are all three of them side by side. It may be inconvenient when doing errands, but they will be living on my keychain because they deserve to see the outside world. Oh, it's too bad you guys can't have one of your own. Ugh, what a shame. But wait, you can. The patterns for all three of these plushies can be found for free on my Ko-fi. It comes with the pattern pieces, the embroidery designs, and step-by-step instructions. There's even some instructions on how to make your own pattern pieces if you want to use this pattern as a base for your own design. So if that interests you, go nab the PDF down below. And if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. And I hope you come back in the future to see any of my future projects. Take care, bye bye! Not clickbait, there is a schnoodle sticker in Regretevator now. Isn't it beautiful? It's literally the best thing made on earth. That is so cool.
Yeah, I agree. That is really cool, actually.